Let's celebrate my third annual St. Patrick's Day show with a family who always celebrate this day with a big backyard party, filled with an abundance of decorations, songs, and spirits. How do I know? I watched it on my phone. You can see nephew Joe and his dad Muggs singing with family and friends. And it's on this day we remember the spirit of a true Irish gentleman, and with a name like John Francis McNamara. You can't get much more Irish than that. So let's go. He goes by Johnny, and that's how he signed Dad's autograph book, so that's what I will call him. John was the fourth of five kids, born 1932 in Sacramento to John and Josephine. John Sr. was born in Ireland and immigrated to Boston, making his way across the country working the railroads. When he died in 1944, Johnny's mom took a job at the DMV to support her family, and he would have to learn how to play sports from his mom's brothers who, lucky for him, lived across the street and were semi-pro baseball players. Johnny was a two-sport star at Christian Brothers High School, named All-City in basketball and baseball. 8 NFL players went to that school. So did 1920 World Series winning pitcher Duster Mayles and Max Baer Jr., my role model since childhood, who I only know as Jethro Bodine. And he taught me how to persevere until you find your calling in life. And like Jethro, I never found it. While playing catcher for the Christian Brothers High School, Johnny won himself an all-expense-paid trip to the World Series for being voted the most outstanding player in the 1950 East-West Prep game held in San Francisco. He was named MVP of the Sacramento County League and named best catcher with no prep experience at the Atwater State Semi-Pro Tournament. California has always been chock full of good baseball players, and John was one of the best catchers around. But it's a big country. There's a lot of good catchers, and they all don't make it to the majors. Early on, he knew his limitations as a player, and that's why John went to college. First to Sacramento Junior College in 1951, helping the Panthers to the state championship. During the early part of his career, he attended Sacramento State during each off-season, eventually earning a degree in accounting. John said, "I could catch and I could throw, but I knew I wasn't going to make the big leagues. I was too small and couldn't hit. I was married and had 4 children to think about." A few teams showed interest in the somewhat undersized righty catcher who was 5'10", 175 pounds. The St. Louis Cardinals signed him for $12,000 partway through the 1951 MLB season and put him on their Class C Fresno Cardinals. He caught for 2 teams in 1952, Double-A ball with Earl Weaver on the Houston Buffaloes, and Class B Lynchburg Cardinals. Those first 2 seasons, Johnny struggled at the plate, and it would be another 2 seasons before returning to pro ball after spending 1953 and 54 in the Army, where he put on 25 pounds. The extra weight didn't help him power-wise at the plate, but would help his average. When he returned to the States, the Cardinals released him, but had the good luck in 1956 to sign on with his hometown team in the Pacific Coast League, the Sacramento Solons, and that's when Dad got his signature. Johnny also caught for the Albuquerque Dukes in 1956, a New York Giants affiliate. With 1957 was split between the Tulsa Oilers and Amarillo Gold Sox, and was the regular catcher for the 1958 Class B Lewiston Broncos, then made their player manager in 1959, with Johnny saying, "That was the turning point in my life." He was with the team through 1962 and a player manager with every team until he started coaching in the majors. He was on the Binghamton Triplets for 1963, the Dallas Rangers in 64, the Birmingham Barons in 65, and on a 1966 Mobile A's team that was stacked with the likes of Rick Monday, Sal Bando, Blue Moon Odom, and Tony La Russa. Johnny's last time in the minors would be 1967 with the Birmingham A's. That team had Raleigh Fingers, Dave Duncan, Joe Rudy, and Reggie Jackson on it, players he would manage in Oakland and later in San Diego. As a minor league manager, John McNamara won 3 pennants with 3 different clubs and named Manager of the Year 4 times, establishing himself as a great developer of talent. So after back-to-back titles, John was called up to the majors for 1968, not as a player like he hoped for since childhood, but as a coach with the newly relocated Oakland A's, not far from where he grew up as a child. And back then, his dream probably wasn't to be a manager. That's a weird kid who does that. Dreams of standing around with a mouthful of chew, arms folded like a grumpy skipper. Or a kid who, instead of dreaming about being a race car driver, dreams of being in the pit crew. Or instead of being a rock star, dreams of being a roadie. But for John, being a coach in the majors was a dream job because he found out being a manager wasn't always. He found that out soon enough working for A's owner Charlie Finley, who'd soon be known for going through managers like a hungry fat kid goes through a bag of Funyuns. John was a candidate for the A's manager job in 1968, but it went to Bob Kennedy, who after one season was replaced by Hank Bauer, who didn't quite make it through one season before being fired in September. This is when Johnny McNamara was next on Finley's list to hire and eventually fire. John managed the final few games, his first in the majors, and was asked to come back for 1970. When you have an owner like Charlie Finley and a few headstrong players, add to that the changing dynamic in baseball with players becoming more outspoken, you're gonna have drama and some excitement, just like there was in Oakland during the late 60s and early 70s. An example of this is when Reggie Jackson started the season slow. Charlie Finley told manager McNamara to platoon him and was thinking of sending Reggie down to the minors. When Reggie heard about that, the following game when he hit a home run, as Reggie rounded the bases, he held one finger in the air in the direction of the owner's box. It was Reggie's middle finger, meant for Finley. A's catcher Dave Duncan was asked about his manager returning for 1971. Dave said, "There's only one man who manages the club, Charlie Finley, and will never win so long as he manages." Finley used that comment to fire John, claiming he couldn't keep his more outspoken players in line. Basically, Finley didn't like being criticized by the players he's paying, with Finley saying this about the man he just fired: "There hasn't been a manager I've enjoyed working with more than John McNamara, and as you know, I've had several managers." Then he said something to the effect, John didn't lose his job, but his players took it away from him. The next 3 years were spent across the bay in San Francisco with the Giants as their third base coach. It was before the start of the 1974 spring training camp, Johnny became the manager of the San Diego Padres, a terrible team that lost 102 games in 1973 and lost 102 under John in 1974. He was there 3 full seasons, then fired when the 77 Padres started out poorly and replaced with Al Dark. After his firing, Gene Tennis said this: "Mac couldn't hit or pitch for us. It wasn't his fault." Raleigh Fingers added, "Mac won't have any trouble finding another job." Doug Rader said, "Any player with an ounce of decency in him will play his heart out for John." John McNamara kept getting hired because he was respected by everyone in the game, though some in the front offices would say Johnny wasn't a disciplinarian, while others said he just wasn't a screamer, unless pushed too far. And yes, he would call out his players when needed. He just did it in a way that made players accept responsibility. Once, Bobby Tolan didn't hustle in an exhibition game, so John took him aside and told him he has 2 choices. He can get chewed out in front of the team or admit to them he was dogging it. Bobby apologized to the team and then fined himself a few cases of beer that he later brought to the clubhouse. Coach Renee Latchman, who played for Johnny in Oakland, said, "He works players hard and strongly believes in discipline. He speaks with quiet voice, but he commands respect." John was always in charge, but was always a strong delegator and believed in giving his coaches the freedom to coach. His job in 1978 as third base coach for the California Angels kept him in California, for a little while longer anyway, because when the Cincinnati Reds fired Sparky Anderson, they hired John to manage for 1979, with John saying, "Words cannot describe how thrilled I was. Took me a while to come down to earth." The Reds lost Pete Rose to free agency, yet still won 90 games and made the playoffs, losing to the We Are Family Pirates in the NLCS. John's first trip to the postseason. The Reds were good in 1980, but finished third. 1981 was the year of the players' strike. Technically, the Reds finished with the best record in baseball, but I don't count strike seasons in any sport. After losing their outfielders, the Reds finished in last place for 1982, and John was fired in July, saying, "Sure, it hurts when it happens. It's a humiliating thing." Meanwhile, back over in California, Gene Mauch retired after his Angels won the division in 1982. Johnny was hired to manage the Angels and did so for the next 2 years. Losing 92 games in 1983 and were a 500 team in 1984 and replaced by Gene Mauch, who came out of retirement. Speaking of retirements, over in Boston at the end of the 84 season, Red Sox manager Ralph Hoke resigned. So GM Haywood Sullivan asked Johnny to manage the Red Sox for 1985. They'd been good friends for years, having worked together in the A's farm system back in the 60s. And John got good reviews after his first season as skipper in Boston. And it all seemed so right. You have one Irishman, Sullivan, hiring another, McNamara, in a city known for its Irish. The Red Sox didn't need luck during the regular season. They were usually in first place. And the same decisions that manager McNamara made that helped Boston win 95 games just didn't pan out in the postseason. A postseason that has become the stuff of legends for a variety of reasons, including Boston running out of luck and more drama than Johnny had to endure while in Oakland with Charlie Finley's A's. First, Boston is down 3-1 in the ALCS to the California Angels, yet win the series stemming from a Game 5 comeback win. A game Angels manager Gene Mauch said was the greatest he'd ever seen. Then in the 1986 World Series, the Red Sox won the first two games on the road. I'll just leave it at that. No one has been blamed more for the Red Sox loss than Johnny McNamara. And after decades of being questioned, blamed, second-guessed, and cursed by many a Bostonian, he probably got tired of giving full explanations and reasons for what happened. And I'm thinking, John distilled it all down to these answers, to these questions. Why did he pull Roger Clemens out of the Game 6? Johnny states Clemens asked to come out. Why didn't he pinch hit for Bill Buckner? Johnny said Buckner was in front of the ball, it just went through his legs. Why did he put Game 6 in the hands of Calvin Schiraldi in the 10th inning? Because Schiraldi was his best reliever. Why didn't he pitch Dennis Boyd in Game 7? Boyd was drunk. I'll leave it at that. And no doubt Johnny would have traded that Manager of the Year award for one more win that October. But his luck ran out that night, and what he needed wasn't there for Game 7, and that was the luck of the Irish. The entire New England region, and especially Red Sox nation, were devastated after that World Series loss. After decades of disappointing seasons they suffered through, 1986 is probably the most disappointing because of how close they were to winning it all, and would have to wait a couple more decades. There was no luck for the 1987 season. They had the same players but finished below 500, and when they struggled early on in the 88 season, manager McNamara lost the support of majority owner Gene Yockey and was fired at the All-Star break. The decision was made at an executive meeting with Johnny's old pal Haywood Sullivan dissenting. John was mad at the way it was handled, and to rub salt in that wound, under new manager Joe Morgan, the team won 19 of 20 and went on to win the AL East. Red Sox Dwight Evans said, "Let me say this in defense of John McNamara. A lot of things happened that you'll never hear about. He protected a lot of people and took the blows for a lot of people." John spent 1989 as a special assignment scout for the Seattle Mariners before being hired to manage the Cleveland Indians for the 1990 season. He was with the Tribe in 1991 until that month of July, when teams fire managers. John said this about the days leading up to his being fired. "I could sense it, especially in the last week. People started staying away from me like I had leprosy." He spent the next 5 years with the California Angels as a catching instructor, then named interim manager in August of 96. 5 days into his new job, he started complaining about a pain in his leg that swelled up. Turned out to be a blood clot, and he would have to be hospitalized, but not before managing the game from the couch in his office using a walkie-talkie. The swelling that caused the clot, they say, was from running on a treadmill in his loafers during a physical exam at the doctor's a few days prior. That was his last job in baseball. John is another baseball lifer who was around the game since 1951 as a pro, almost half of the 20th century. Between 1969 and 1996, Johnny McNamara was in and out of the dugout for nearly 2,400 games as an MLB manager for 6 franchises, walking away with 1,160 wins to 1,233 defeats, 2 division titles, and 1 pennant. Anybody who was around John would say how focused he was on the game, and like most managers, their waking hours revolve around baseball. But he would try to detach from the game and relax, saying, "I will have a book with me all the time, whether at home or on the road, and I'll read. What I read depends on my mood. Detective stories, cowboy stories, I'll read history. I really enjoy music too. Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Nat King Cole. I have a lot of tapes. I turn on a tape and read." John married Kathleen early on during his playing days, and the two would raise 3 girls and a boy who were given proper Irish names. Mr. McNamara passed away at the age of 88 on July 28, 2020. Some kids' ambitions force them to do something they don't want to do, but do it so they can chase their dream, John said. I started school so I could learn to write my name so I could sign a baseball contract. John was 12 when his dad died, leaving his mom to raise 5 kids by herself. The death of his father must have come to the forefront in his mind when in 1996 an unspeakable tragedy happened to the family. A Boston Globe reporter asked John about that. Johnny told him how the words of his mother helped him maintain perspective. She told us that God doesn't give you a cross that he doesn't think you can carry. So I'll wrap up my annual St. Patrick's Day show with some heartfelt words from a baseball legend whose words carry real weight, not just in the baseball world, but in sports, and that would be Reggie Jackson. In his Hall of Fame induction speech, Mr. October thanked John, then said this: I learned to understand friendship and sensitivity from a very special friend by the name of John McNamara. He was my manager, and he would not allow the team to eat in a restaurant where I was not allowed to eat. I always wondered why we ate sandwiches on the bus and made only essential pit stops. I understood care from that. I'll always remember you, John. Thank you for your dignity and sensitivity and for stepping up at a time when very few did, said Reggie. It's always nice when someone is given well-deserved praise that they are there to hear it. Even better when that praise comes from one of the greats in your profession. Johnny never got on the field as a major league ball player like he wanted to, but he was a major league manager who was so close to becoming a legend, is instead, along with his 86 Red Sox team, legendary. But when you're the manager, you can't put yourself on the lineup card and then run out on the field and play. Well, unless that is your longtime player manager, Johnny McNamara, who couldn't do that in the 1986 World Series at the age of 54, although the player in him wanted to. The thoughtful skipper knew better than to push his luck. In Johnny's case, that luck would be Irish. And if you're lucky enough to be Irish, you're lucky enough.